And you'll put this up on the library website?
Yes, it will be up on the library website probably in the next couple of days. Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to the encore presentation of our Meet the Author event with Sally Franson. I'm Melody Sky Weaver. I'm the library director and now community services director for the city of Port Townsend. And I've had the great joy of getting to oversee the community reads for the last decade. And in fact, this year we're celebrating our 20th anniversary of community reads, which is a huge testament to how amazing of a reader community we have. And this year, I thought now more than ever, it would be really important to celebrate the joy of reading with a delightful novel, which is what we have in Big in Sweden. I also will say that I don't know of any other community in Washington that's done 20 years of community reads. So that just makes Port Townsend that extra special. I have lots of gratitude to share tonight because it takes a village to put together the community read. And that's a big part of it, is that it is our community coming together in celebration about reading. So first of all, a big shout out to Emily Bufford, who's our Zoom producer tonight. And you may know her as our wonderful youth services library manager. Of course, a huge thank you to Sally Franson. She was just in Port Townsend last week and got to do lots of wonderful events with the book clubs, with high school students, and then an in-person event at the Northwest Maritime Center. And then this program is made possible most especially because of our Port Townsend friends and foundation of the library. So they make all of these programs possible through their generous support with their book sales and their bookshop in the Pink House, if you haven't been there, on Mondays and Thursdays. And tomorrow, no fooling, even though it's April Fool's Day, it is Library Giving Day. So I encourage you all to go to the library website if you feel inspired and donate to our Friends of the Library. And Emily will put a link in the chat too, if that's possible. If not, just go to ptpubliclibrary.org to learn more, and then save the date. The next Friends of the Library book sale is April 26th at the community center, and it's those book sales that make these programs possible. So, and this year we were able to have 500 copies of Big in Sweden out in the community, which is really wonderful. A special thanks to our other incredible community sponsors, Daughters of Norway, Jefferson County Genealogical Society, Port Townsend Film Festival, the Rose Theater, Imprint Bookshop, Northwest Maritime Center, Port Townsend School District, our Port Townsend Jefferson County Leader, Peninsula Daily News, and KPTZ 91.9. So it really does take a beautiful village to put this program together. So Sally and I are going to be in conversation tonight, talking about Big in Sweden, and then maybe sharing a little bit of our own experiences. We have a wonderful author librarian meet cute of how we met, and please put questions in the chat. I'll make sure to be reviewing the chat and weaving them into our discussion. So without further ado, let's give Sally a big round of applause. Woo! Well, hello, Miss Sally Franson. Oh, you're muted. Oh, she can't unmute herself. Give us 1 second. Fun technical difficulties. See, it would not be a really great Zoom event without some shenanigans. Okay. I have asked you to unmute.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Yay, now you have voice. And I want to give you, I know you don't want a huge intro, but Sally Franson is the author of 2 incredible novels, A Lady's Guide to Selling Out. So if you've all already read Big in Sweden, get A Lady's Guide to Selling Out. It's incredible. Hoping someday that both of these incredible books are going to be movies. She's also been a Minnesota Book Award finalist. She's zooming in all the way from Minneapolis tonight. And yay! After just being in Port Townsend and having a grand time. And in 2022, she was a cast member of Allt för Sverige, a Swedish reality TV show about finding your roots. And I just happened to be on that show with Sally. So Sally, welcome.
Yay! Thanks so much for having me, Melody. It's great to have friends in high places. You know, I'm against cronyism except when it works in my favor. So, so it's a joy to be here. And I just want to second the gratitude that Melody shared, especially I want to send my thanks to the Friends of the Port Townsend Public Library, who really made my visit to Port Townsend possible last week. And it was such an extraordinary experience that I'm still glowing from. So, what a treat that I get to virtually bomb you one more time with this encore Zoom performance. And of course, Melody, I adore you, and I'm so happy to be in conversation with you again.
Oh, thank you so much, Sally. We're getting such lovely compliments and applause too in the comments. So I love that. Um, well, and I think too, I've been looking at the statistics for the program. We've had almost 1,000 people participate in our programs this month. And I don't know about
Oh.
you, Sally, but it seems like a really wonderful time to bring joy and delight to people and to bring people together from all different walks of life. And Big in Sweden has done that. And you got to experience that too. Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. So, do you want to talk a little bit about your inspiration for this delightful novel?
Yes. I will like 1,000 people. Wow. Like it's funny. We spend so much time alone writing a book, and then the idea that, people would engage with it in so many different ways in Port Townsend over the course of a month is, it really is just as a dream come true for me. So as Melody said, the truth really is stranger than fiction in the case of this novel, Big in Sweden. I was having a really hard time writing what I thought was going to be my second book. It was a Western epic sort of about Mormonism and water and Utah and the restaurant industry and all of these things that I knew nothing about, nothing about, but I wanted people in the publishing industry to take me seriously after my funny first book. And it was going nowhere. My agent hated it. So on a whim, I applied to this show called Alt for Sverige that I had heard about through my friend Emma, who was actually at the talk in Port Townsend last week, which is so fun.
Through total
She
serendipity.
Yes, the serendipity, it just continues. She said, "Hey, there's a show. My friend has done it. She had a lot of fun doing it. I think you're Swedish. You should give it a try." And I said, "I can't do that. I'm a very serious novelist with very serious work to do." And then I was alone in my apartment in the dark because it gets dark at 4 p.m. here, as I think it does in Port Townsend in December. And just on a whim, I busted out my phone and recorded a video and uploaded it and was just like, what have I done? Um, so long calendar pages fall off the wall. I get on the show. It takes forever to film because COVID happens. We're in lockdown. And then I go and I have this totally bizarre, horrible, wonderful, life-changing experience of doing a TV show in a foreign country and like the most beloved TV show in Sweden. And the probably the best part about that was that after being in lockdown for well over a year, it just opened my heart up to the world again and to people. Um, and when I got home, I called my agent who knew that I'd been going on this journey. And I was kind of regaling her with all these stories. I was like, and then we met Vikings and then we, did all this and I ate all this food and, I was drunk all the time and, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, but anyway, I know I've got to get back to work on my book. And she said, Sally, why don't you try writing all this down when it's so alive in your heart? Like I can hear it in your voice. Like, why don't you just try writing some of this down? So I did, and within like a couple weeks, I had an outline, and within maybe 6 months, I had like 50 pages. Um, and which I sold on proposal to Mariner Books at HarperCollins, and then I spent the next year and a half writing the darn thing. And a lot of people will assume that because it's the broad strokes are the same. A very tall, clumsy blonde leaves Minneapolis to go on a trip of a lifetime to Sweden. All of that is true in life and in the novel. But actually, the experiences that I had versus the experiences that Polly Johansson, the protagonist of Big in Sweden, has are quite different. Not only emotionally, but just in terms of the actual trip that she goes on and the people she meets along the way. And some of that I did for legal reasons, and then some of that I did for imaginative reasons. I had just
Mhm.
a lot of fun making stuff up. And then the third reason that it's like that is because I met these wonderful people like Melody, and I'm such good friends with them that I can't write about them. I'm like too close to the material, and so I borrowed things here and there, but I made the characters my own. And the thing I always like to say that really is truth is stranger than fiction is that one of Melody's and my castmates was a private zookeeper who had bruises on her leg from when a deer kicked her when she showed up to film. And that is just a sort of incredible detail that as a novelist I would have died to use. But if you would have read that in the book, you would have thought that is just too ridiculous. That person doesn't exist. And so I just get to like treasure that in my heart and know that that's true and then, create these whole new people instead.
I love that, Sally. And we've been in conversation several times now about this book, but one of my favorite things that you have said when people ask, like, how much are you like Polly, or is your husband like Declan? And I love your response. All the characters are who in the book?
All the characters are me.
Yes.
And that's, one of the joys of writing a novel is that unlike writing an op-ed or unlike even writing nonfiction, is that as a fiction writer, you don't have to settle on a single personality or point of view. You can kind of borrow and steal from all parts of yourself and put them into other characters. So a lot of times, especially in the arguments between Declan and Polly, who are partnered up in the book, people will assume that I'm on Polly's side, like I want Polly to win. But actually, like depending on the day, I was very much ambivalent about who was right. And I think that's what makes for good storytelling. Storytelling isn't didactic. It's not about right and wrong. It's about how people have such different ways of seeing the world and different points of view. And I love that as a writer, I get to explore that without sort of having to settle down on one way of thinking because I can't. I'm like way too confused about life to have a set opinion, which, made me like a really bad like I can't even know if I can write nonfiction anymore, honestly, because I'm never quite sure what I think. So I just think a lot of things for 300 pages and then give up and write something else.
No, it's great to have that creative freedom, Sally. And the quote I keep using is from when I saw Elizabeth Gilbert, author of Eat, Pray, Love, and Committed, when she was in Seattle for City of Girls. And people were kind of asking her, like, how much truth is in this book? And she said, well, if you want to tell the truth, you write a novel. And if you want to lie and lie your pants off, you write a memoir.
Yes, and I've definitely found that to be true in the sense that like I think we all need a mask. There's a reason that really great actors reveal themselves while they're playing a different character, and
Mm.
that when we start to kind of use the I voice of like, this is me, then we start to kind of protect our selfhood. And it's just like so natural. Like we don't want to get hurt. In real life, of course, I like being right as much as the next person. I believe my opinions are the best opinions, all those things that kind of make me
You're the
annoying.
hero of your own story, right?
I'm the hero of my own story in life, and I
Yeah.
don't have to be that when I'm writing, and it's so liberating. Like I like being able to kind of like throw that off is I think it's just been really good for me as a human being. And when I look back at some of the old like nonfiction that I used to write, including essays, I just cringe. I just think, who is this person? Who's trying to sound like such a certain way to like impress people? I don't feel like I have to do that when I write fiction, and yeah, I think it makes the work better for me. I think other people are
Yeah.
amazing at writing nonfiction, but
Yeah. Well, speaking of really great actors and actresses, I'm a huge audiobook fan. And how amazing that Meg Ryan, someone we probably both grew up just loving, I think I've seen everything she's ever done, is your audiobook narrator. And you actually remind me a lot of Meg Ryan, like with all the delightfulness of her. So, how did that happen, Sally? How did you get Meg Ryan in the book and do Swedish accents?
oh my gosh. Well, I'll pass along your praise. I know it'll mean a lot to Meg, but the it's really dumb luck. Like a lot of, I think a lot of like in the arts, like so much kind of success or big things are just it's just chance. Like once you get to like a certain level of skill, it's just like how the cards lay. Um, but my agent, like people in Hollywood are always looking for work to adapt or develop because IP is so important in Hollywood. Like um, scripts that are written like from scratch, which they call spec scripts, don't really get made anymore. So they're always looking to adapt books, video games, pull back old franchises, which I'm sure you've all seen in theaters and on streaming. So they passed that my agency passed my first book, A Lady's Guide to Selling Out, to Meg, along with a stack of other books, being like, see if you like any of these, because she produces as well as acts and directs. And to my great good fortune, my book resonated with her, and she wanted to option it to produce and direct it. And so my agent called to tell me this. I obviously like screamed and peed my pants and started crying. I was just like, what? It was just like too much, like for a Midwestern girl. So that was in 2018. And then since then, we've really struck up a friendship. Which she doesn't like to call it mentorship, I think because she feels like I don't know why. I feel like maybe it's like too fusty a role, but I would say that she's like an incredible champion and advocate for my work, and that I've been able to, in my limited way, collaborate or just talk with her on some of her projects. Like she had a film come out in 2023, What Happens Later, a rom-com.
Mhm.
I read that while it was a development. We talked a lot about sort of the world of the story, and all of that was just like, I mean, I think she and I are really kindred spirits on a level of the work. Like our lives are obviously so different, our experiences are so different, but like I think she really understands what I'm trying to do, and I think I really understand what she's trying to do too. And she's so funny and she's so smart. So calendar pages fall off the wall. It's time to start. It's time to start looking for audiobook narrators, and they sent me some. Mariner did, my publisher, and I went through, and I just was not. No shade to any of them. I just was not feeling it. I was like, this book has such a particular voice. It has such a particular comedic voice. Um, these people are not going to be able to do it. And I had problems with my Ladies Guide audiobook narrator too, just because I'm like, I think comedy is like it's so much to do about timing. It has so much to do about tone. It's really, really hard to do if that's not what you're trained in. So it was a Hail Mary pass. I was like, I don't know if she'd want to, but I want to ask Meg. And they're like, okay, we'll have her people call our people or blah blah blah. And I was like, I feel like you guys are gonna drop the ball just because, and some it's gonna get lost in translation. So I was like, well, let me
Yeah.
just try like calling her myself. So I texted her and I was like, hey, do you have a minute? Like, I'd love to ask you something. And she was like, yeah, give me five. And I was like, blah, 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 blah. Like
Oh my
I'm
God.
moving like so fast. I'm like sweating through all my clothes. My baby's napping, and I was like, stay asleep, kid. And like I called her and I asked her this favor. I was like, would you do this audiobook? I really can't think of anyone else who would do such a good job. And she had no idea what the book was. I don't even think I told her the title. And she was like, absolutely. Where do you want me? And that really meant so, so much, because that she trusted me enough to take that leap, especially because it was a book that was linguistically quite challenging. And that also, it was a big get for me as a non-famous writer, that some people might buy the audiobook just to listen to her, because she's
Yeah.
such a name. Um, so 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 I got to be kind of I was not on the recording. The director didn't want me there, probably because I would have tried to direct myself and she didn't want that. Fair enough. Um, but I was getting notes, like Meg and I would talk like after
Sure.
every recording day. She recorded it at her neighbor's house. I told Melody, I think earlier, that her neighbors do a bunch of voices for the Smurfs, so they have an in-home recording studio, like state of the art. So she got
This
to
is so
record.
nostalgic from our 80s childhood,
Yeah.
Sally.
So she got to record in the Smurf studio. Um, and the engineer what happened to be Swedish. So I had given her kind of what they call, gosh, what do they call it? I think it's called a style guide with all the pronunciations.
Mhm.
But the Swedish engineer helped with the pronunciations too. Uh, and I told her, I was like, I completely trust you. And she had read the book a couple times and she just totally went for it, and I think you can hear that in the recording. And yeah, it just brings me, that kind of collaboration is like my collaboration with you this past week, Melody. It's like I really thrive on that. I don't
Mm.
like working alone as much as I've like set up my life to work alone. Like the collaboration part when I emerge with something that I feel like is worth sharing is just the best. It just makes me so happy.
Well, and that's where the magic is, and I love that. That's like that's what great friendship is all about, like showing up for each other. And I think
Yeah.
you have such a gift for capturing female friendships. Oh, and just I think female friendships as well, because there are some really powerful friendships in Big in Sweden, starting with Gemma and Polly. And I love like Gemma's this illustrious like dog groomer to the stars or something. But she's helping Polly as Polly is a hot mess at the beginning of the book before she has really good character development. But the friendship is just golden, Sally.
Yes, that was something that really I became very preoccupied with representing starting with my first novel because and I was very inspired by TV shows like Broad City, where the primary romance of that show is really between these two best friends. And that's, I think, I think that's become more and more common in like millennial art culture, moving away from this, like the Sex and the City, where it's like, will they ever pass the Bechdel test? Which is like, can women talk about something other than men? Like, I think our generation is and it's true to my experience. It's not even like I'm like I'd like to focus on female friendships, but it's like the women in my life are like some of the great loves of my life, and these are
Mhm.
not I do not consider these relationships second fiddle to a marriage or to a family. These are really the bedrock of my identity, my community, my family, my social relationships. Well, that doesn't mean that they're not complicated, or it means that they are wonderfully complicated
Mhm, mhm,
and that there's a level of intimacy that's so deep that a lot of the time what's being communicated is nonverbal. It's physical or it's between the notes of the words. And I think that Gemma and
mhm,
Polly really have that. Thinking of one of their last scenes together when they've where they're talking about Polly's mom, and Polly has a difficult mom, and Gemma grew up with Polly and knows a lot of the family story. And so seeing Gemma be able to be there for Polly in a way that's just holding space for her to have
mhm.
this complex emotional experience in real time. That's my experience of one of the many beautiful forms of love is being mothered by my friends and be having the opportunity to mother them back. So I always want to represent that because I think like love stories or romance like are, they're so fun to write, they're so fun to read. And that's not the only love that I have in my life, and I'm pretty sure it's not the only love that a lot of people have
Yeah.
in their lives. And then Polly gets to make without any spoilers, gets to make a pretty special new friend, um, Becky, in the course of doing the show. And I found it really fun to write those scenes too, because I also have had the experience of being very distrustful of a woman right away for XYZ reasons, and then realizing that some of my first impressions were entirely incorrect and had to do with my own baggage and emotional junk, and um, getting to remove all those layers myself and then having the other person remove their layers too to just see like, oh, you're a sweetheart. you know we were just kind of scared of each other. I think that's a really fun kind of relationship to document as well. So and like again, I think like in traditional, if you think about a lot of narratives that are written by men where it's the romance is often the B plot in books and movies written by men, like I think like Judd Apatow movies, for example, and it's about a
Mhm.
group of pals. And so I try to write my books in the inverse, where like they're okay, like I'll put in a romance, but it's never going to be the primary storyline because they don't have to. So why do I?
And it's maybe not the greatest love affair of your life. I mean, my mom would always say the greatest love affair you'll ever have is with yourself.
Yes, yeah, it's totally. And it's not to downplay, it's it like especially talking about it in a novel, it's not to downplay romance or to undersell it, but um that's really not what Big in Sweden is about. It's really about um again, there's like hints of romance sort of blooming here and there, but I think it's about falling in love with the world,
Mhm.
and having that love also bloom internally in oneself as well.
Mm. Yeah, well, and I love too that you have described this book as, and maybe I'm adding words to this too, but I feel like it's a feminist odyssey, and I love it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Mentioned that at the talk I gave to Port Townsend High School, was that there's a very glancing mention to Homer's Odyssey at the beginning of the novel. And you all probably know this because you're well-read people, but Odysseus goes on his Odyssey for many years, Penelope staying at home weaving, like waiting for him, like not taking any more suitors. He gets to go do all this crazy stuff. Like he hooks up with a witch. Like, he's just like he gets to have the time of his life. And all I wanted was to write the opposite of that, where like a woman gets to go off and have these crazy times and like it's her man back home, like checking her emails, like doing the cooking.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Oh,
Oh, I love
yeah.
that. Declan is such a great Penelope.
Yeah, he is. He's such a Penelope. And people, it's so funny because people will be like, "Oh, I feel bad for Declan." I'm like, Declan's fine.
Yeah.
You know?
He's very grounded. Yeah. And by the way, if you all have not read Circe by Madeline Miller, oh wow.
Oh,
That's
what a great book.
yeah, yeah,
I think that absolutely informed my text as well.
yeah.
Yeah, totally.
That's so great. Well, I want to talk, there's a thousand things I want to talk about, but one of the things I want to touch on, because the book is in Sweden and it's about finding your roots and uh, also learning about Swedish culture. And you just do such a beautiful job, Sally, of weaving in these concepts in Swedish. You know, we always know that in other languages, there's these words that don't totally translate. But you really try, I think, to translate them through the experience in the book. And one of my favorite ones in the book, that's one of my favorite scenes, is about wild strawberry places, which is Smaltronstali, correct my pronunciation?
Yeah, Smultron Stella.
Stella. Small,
Yeah.
yeah. So talk about that, and if you want to weave in fika and lagom too, those are just beautiful lessons for, I think, a joyful life.
Yes. So Smultron Stella is I'm trying to remember how I might have very first come across the word when I was actually doing my Swedish lessons on Babbel, like after I got home from doing the show. And it was just translating it literally as like wild
Wow.
strawberry place. And I was like, oh, okay, well, and it was translating it as like special place. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I think I Googled it and then I came across several websites sort of dedicated to this like very particular sort of um, like enchanted concept, and then it turns out that Ingmar Bergman has a movie called Smiltron Stella, which I tried watching. It's very boring, so I didn't.
And probably very long. That's
And very long. It's on HBO Max, like if you want to go check it out. But and then I asked my Swedish relatives who I'm still like tight with, I was like, how would you kind of explain this to me? And what I gleaned from the Bergman film, even though it was like very long and boring, is like this young boy escapes from there's like a kind of a family party going on at a summer cottage, and he escapes to this like patch of strawberries, and he lies on his back, and he just kind of gets immersed there until like the adults drag him out. And I had a similar experience when I spent midsummer in Sweden with my Swedish cousins in 2022. Yes. I went wild strawberry hunting with them. They knew all the good spots, and my little cousins, who were like 10 at the time, just going and they're just, just like eating these tiny strawberries. It was so
love that.
charming. But so all of that context in my mind, and I go back to this, to the etymology of the word, which is, as a writer, etymology dictionaries are like catnip, as I'm sure they are for librarians too, Melody. Um, and so my understanding of the word is, from all of that research and context, is that it's not just a literal place where you find wild strawberries, which is true. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
because wild strawberries, smultron, is a different word than strawberry in Swedish, which is jordgubbe.
Which
So
means old man face, grumpy old man face
a
or
grumpy
something.
old man face. So a
Yeah.
smoothtron is it's a special kind of thing. And so a wild strawberry place is it can be somewhere where in the summer or at midsummer you go with your family and you find your wild strawberries. But it can also be the feeling that you get when you come home from midsummer and you're at your family's cottage and it's, you're watching the maypole and you're getting that feeling of just like, oh, this enchantment or like this coziness. Or it doesn't even have to be related to anything related to wild strawberries, but if you're curled up with a book or you're on a train with a friend or all those things and you just have that feeling of like this is like a home for me, even though it's maybe not a
Mm.
home. It's like a place where I have some like unmistakable feeling of belonging. And I loved that so much that when my book got published, I'm gonna see if I can show you. Um, I got a wild strawberry. There's a tiny little it's called a wild strawberry charm. I got it at a jewelry store called Catbird. And I bought one for Meg as a thank you for narrating the audiobook, and I got one for my agent as well. So I wear it every day, next to a charm that is for my daughter. And I always think about like yeah, having this internal wild strawberry place and this feeling that I got while writing the book, this feeling of like really deep, warm, loving empathy for all, just having it close to my heart. Yeah, Spilled from Stella, a great wild strawberry place, such a great word. Often when I sign books now, I'll say, "Go find your wild strawberry place," and I
Oh,
want people to be able to do that. So that's definitely my favorite Swedish word.
yeah.
And then probably my second favorite Swedish word is lagom, which is in the book
Oh,
as
yeah.
well,
Yeah.
which just means not too much, not too little. And it's so funny because I did some interviews with Swedish magazines sometime around either the book being published or the show airing. And I think like one of the quotes that the magazine pulled was me saying, "I'm not very lagom," which is true. I'm not a particularly moderate, a very effusive person.
I don't think either of us are, Sally.
No. But I like the idea in it, I like the idea. I mean, it's a very like social welfare, it's just like kind of socialist mantra. But it comes from the Vikings, which is if you had like a horn of mead or whatever, you only drank as much as everyone else in the circle could drink, which is like so anti-American, like can you imagine, not gonna name any names, but can you imagine certain billionaires, being like, you know what? I've had my share. Like I'm gonna share all of this with others. But I like that that's so much a part of their ethos, and I think it informs their politics, their social infrastructure,
Mhm.
in a way that I wish it did ours a little bit more.
I love that, Sally. And I just, I was thinking about it's such an act of love for the library team to put on the community read every year. And the goal is to build community through the shared experience of reading and discussing the same book, which is really magical because you're entering this same world, even though you know, not two people necessarily read the same book. But one of the really lovely things I have been doing is I make house calls during the month of March, and I go to people's book clubs in their homes and help facilitate a book club. And I went to one book club, and the lady started off by saying, "You all are my small town Stella."
Oh
And she
my gosh.
wanted everyone in the book club to know that they were her wild strawberry place, and I think we all just teared up because it was such a
Yeah.
beautiful moment of, like, connection and friendship, which is what this whole program is all about. It's nice when you go and see an author and you have that special experience, but we wanna deepen the connections even further, and, so that was, like, one of the hi there's been so many lovely highlights this month, but that was really one of the top for me.
Wow. That is, to me, that's like worth like 100 pounds of gold, like
It's
because
priceless.
yes, I think I truly believe that, if I'm doing my job, well, the book doesn't need me anymore. Like an author talk is like well and fun or whatever, but like, it is its own thing that exists and that people get to use and work with and make sense of and collaborate with others like well beyond anything that I could imagine. So that happening in a book club, again, that like I love that that has nothing to do with me. Like that just brings me truly so much joy. Um, wow. Love them.
Maybe you're a little bit of a human artist too, of bringing people together. I mean, that's the beauty of it. You don't want to read in isolation. I don't, the other really one of the most joyful things besides our talk on Thursday night, where we have a giant rainbow appear behind us. People are
That
pointing
was
at
pretty
us, and I'm like,
great.
"Do I have a piece of broccoli in my teeth?" No, it was because the like most beautiful, magnificent rainbow was over the water as we were talking, which is special. But then Saturday we showed Mamma Mia at our beautiful Rose Theater, and we had like 120 people dressed up in ABBA costumes. You know, think about all the wild, colorful, fun things that you can see singing and dancing to Mamma Mia together. And if you need a pick me up, like go sing and dance to ABBA songs with other people.
Were people just really like singing their hearts
Yeah,
out?
they were just belting it out. It's, you know, there was the permission slip to sing. And I think we all walked out on clouds. You could feel it. Like we all just
Yeah.
feel, we felt so much love and joy for our community, and that we got to support an amazing theater and our Port Townsend Film Festival and the library. Like it was just this beautiful convergence of so many things, Sally's. And thank you. You got to do, you
I have such intense FOMO that I missed that. Like, why did my flight have to be that day? Why?
so I just want to recreate it all over again. I was like, oh,
I know, me too. Back to the
yeah,
beginning.
I know. We should do that again. Well, speaking of the beginning, something I didn't share, which I've shared in some other talks, is just the meet cute that you and I had being on the
Oh,
show.
yes, you have to tell them.
Yeah. So, of course, you know, Sally and I are on this show. We don't know anybody who's going to be on the show. You have to sign this like 20-page non-disclosure agreement, which I remember I had an attorney friend look over and I was like, "Can you make sure I'm not giving away a first child?" And I remember him, he looked at it and he's like, "No, but they can tell you what to wear." And I'm like, "I'm okay with that. Like, that's okay. I bet we'll wear some fun costumes." Little did we know that we'd go to a medieval island for medieval week and either look like peasants or royalty, depending on what costumes we got. But they also took away our phones. So we had like no contact with the outside world. And we had what they called a mini quarantine in Denmark before we started filming. And they told all the cast, don't, you guys can't meet each other. So, of course, like anytime the producers weren't around, we snuck out like on a little park bench and ate our dinner together. And I remember we did the typical thing that Americans do where you start a conversation and you say, "What do you do? What do you do?" And so, of course, I ask you, Sally, and you tell me you're a writer, and I tell you that I'm a librarian. And then I have this intense deja vu that I've met you before or something. I can't figure it out. And I go back that night to my hotel room and I get out my little paper white Kindle that I had loaded with like 100 books before I left. So I wouldn't be without anything because we might have been in Sweden for 6 weeks. And I have your first novel, A Lady's Guide to Selling Kindle, which I read while I was in Sweden.
Which is, yeah, just to emphasize, like, this was not a book that was like pouring off of bookshelves the summer of 2021. Like, it's pretty extraordinary, like the odds of that. And it was such a joy to feel like we had an immediate, not only intellectual, but sort of just like way of orienting to the world that was really based on language and sort of lifting up the rock, to not just see what is, but why things are the way they are, and do they have the potential to be something else. It was such a relief to have someone like-minded on this very, very wacky adventure.
Well, that's what I like to say, Sally. I mean, I had begged you for an advanced reader copy. I'm like, please, I want to read this book early. We call it arcs in the biz. And I remember reaching out to you right after I read it, feeling like I had stayed up all night, like belly laughing and ugly crying. Because even though it wasn't our experience in Sweden, it still captured the magic and mayhem and madness of going to another country to find your family and being on a reality show.
Very, very
Like,
strange thing to do.
I know. Uh, well, and I think something too that you talk about so well in the book is about found family.
Yes, it was so. I think that both of my novels are about that, which doesn't um, surprise me in the sense that and the great short story writer Antonia Nelson said that writers never need to announce their obsessions will announce themselves. And, I have a complicated relationship with my family of origin. There's abuse in my family for many generations back on both sides. And so I've been really interested myself in terms of, sort of constructing a healthy family, and what that can mean in the contemporary age, as a feminist, with more autonomy than women, in particular in my family, have ever had. And so found family has been, which comes out of the queer community, and particularly the term comes out of kind of queer studies around the AIDS crisis when, women or men, particularly young gay men, were getting HIV and then shipping home to their like parents' house to die, basically, when there was no cure. And their families often weren't letting their longtime partners visit them, or in hospitals or in hospices, their longtime partners weren't allowed to visit. So there was this incredible activism done in the LGBTQ community to start to codify what found family means, and, push that in terms of adoption law and all that stuff. And that really has resonated with me for years as someone who, I feel like my life is, I'm married to a man, but my family and my way of constructing family is like queering traditional notions of like nuclear family
Mhm.
and kind of atomized family structures. Actually, while our shower is broken, one of my very best friend lives 2 blocks away, so I was over there all afternoon. She's out of town, giving Harriet a bath, my daughter, and playing with their cats. So that's what I really mean by found family, where
Oh,
uh, where you can be adopted and adopt into all kinds of organizations and people, and treat those relationships as sacred as we would think of with traditional blood ties. So it's really funny, of course, to be writing and thinking about that while doing a genealogical reality TV show, and having all this enormous effort and expense gone to tracking my blood relations many generations back. But it made me think hard about what I think is like a pretty perennial or evergreen American question, which is just like, who are we, nature and nurture? How much are we able to self-determine? And how much are we the consequences of, those people and those decisions that came before us? And of course, as a novelist, I don't have answers except to say yes. My answer is yes to all of that. Um, but I did a whole bunch of research, not only into genealogy studies, but also heritage studies, like what does heritage mean in the 21st century? Um, and yeah, I have almost nothing to say that's not in a novel, but I will say that it seems to me, as a person, and then as I've talked to people at book events, that the more capacious we can be in our understanding of family, the happier we'll all be. Because a lot of times these narrow ideas of family aren't working for us.
oh, Sally, that's so powerful. That's what I've heard too, and I feel this way. But I've heard this a lot in the many book discussions we've had. Is people will open the book and show all the underlining that they did, or write on post-it notes to be respectful if it's a library book. Uh, just about just the philosophical truths and interesting things you have woven into this narrative. And you say something that has had such a profound impact on my worldview about like we have a I think you say it like this: we have a God-given right to delight and joy in our lives.
Yes, I really believe that, and I think for some reason that seems to be one of my humble jobs on this troubled planet of ours, is just to be like, I don't know if my job is to remind people of that, but just to live it and see what those consequences might be. And I think probably my favorite moment of all of last week, Melody, was when we did this wonderful talk at the Northwest Maritime Center, and it ended, Melody and I did the Q&A with our clown noses on, which I had brought from Minneapolis. I am a graduate of 2 different clown schools, I will say.
I am
Um,
now I'm having the FOMO because that's always been my plan B.
I will say I don't think it's a very lucrative business, but But we were just having a ball, and the talk finished and people were exiting, and this woman got up, stretched her arms out there. She goes, "Ah, thanks for the laughs." And I just feel like that gesture and
Yeah.
that, I was just like, yes, there's so much about this world that I don't have any control over. And I have no idea how to fix, but I do know how good this feeling is, and I would love to be able to share that as much as I can through the work that I do.
Mhm. Yeah. I think it's also, when times are tough for whatever reason, I think it can be a radical act to remember how important pleasure and joy and delight are, to have those in our daily lives and to make space for that.
Yes, I can't recommend the book Pleasure Activism more.
Yes, that's right. That's the book you mentioned.
Yes, it's Adrienne Marie Brown is I think the author's name. She's a Black feminist activist and is working in the tradition of Audre Lorde, who is the person, also a radical Black feminist activist, who is the person that initially originally coined the term self-care, which, spoiler alert, it was not for $5,000 yoga retreats on Bali led by white women. It was about this idea that the more that we tend to our inner worlds, it's not only an act of survival, it's an act of cultural warfare. Um, because the thing that I always like to say about joy and delight is that they're free,
Yeah.
and that people can't profit off of them the way that they can profit off of fear and the way that they can profit off of scarcity and greed. And so that's why I do think that it's these are radical things to not only be kind of happening upon, but sort of practicing as like as a discipline. And another book I'd recommend in that vein, if you're interested, is Ross Gay's The Book of Delights.
Yes. Yes.
He embarked on a project for a year where he wrote about a delight that he encountered in the world every single day. And it's so powerful because you realize that it's just about attention. It's not about like, you know, fun times or everything coming up roses in your life, your work, whatever. It's just about attention. And I find that so powerful, especially as so many people, entities, corporations are competing for our attention right now, that we get to decide where it goes.
Yeah. I think you have another really wonderful part in it's woven throughout the book, Pippi Longstocking, and this will lead us into questions from the audience. But I love another notion is how important it is to be kind, because Astrid Lindgren said, and this is, Pippi Longstocking's philosophy: when you are very strong, you must be very kind.
Yes, and I think, those of us who are in the world attempting to be kind, it can by some be mistaken for weakness. And so I think what's so great about Pippi, who is literally the strongest girl in the world, is that she's strong, right? No one can doubt that she's strong, but that her strength and her merriment and her generosity with people, they're all part of the same strength, which is she will not be cowed by anybody. She won't be cowed by their shame. She won't be cowed by their scorn. They won't be cowed by her anger,
Hmm.
their anger that she's not behaving the way that they want to behave. She is always lovely to everybody. And she also can pick them up and put them in a tree. And like I aspire to that.
I know. Isn't that every like little kid's fantasy? It's just so wonderful. And we had one question from the audience. So we wove in a bunch of Pippi programs thanks to Emily's brilliance. We had a little Pippi tea coffee party, and we have a chapter of a Pippi Longstocking book at Kata Lagoon Nature Reserve, and that's there through the end of this week. And then we're going to have Joe Harjo's uh, book about poetry for Poetry Month in April. So you have just until the end of the week to walk that lovely story walk and read about Pippi dealing with some difficult people and having a lovely coffee party.
I love that chapter so much. She's dealing with some mean ladies.
Yeah, mean ladies. That's true.
Friends of her friends Tommy and Annabelle's mom, who don't think that it's appropriate that she lives alone and that she dresses funny and that she doesn't know how to behave. And Pippi shows them.
Yeah, she
She
does.
shows them
It's so
who's
good.
boss.
It's so good to read that. And of course, if you want to revisit Pippi, we also have the movie and the book, so that's just so lovely. So please, if you have any questions for Miss Sally, put it in the chat. So just following up on Pippi, was the part about Astrid Lindgren's home, was that a wish in your heart to meet Astrid Lindgren? It was really one of the most magical parts of the book.
And I mean, it must be because, like, I think one special thing about writing a novel is that, like, for a while you think you're God, like, you think you have control over everything, and it's really like, okay, it's a chess match, and I'm getting everyone, in a certain space so I can make this happen. It's like an action machine. Like, did you ever play that game Mousetrap as a kid? I feel
Yes,
like
of
I'm building
course.
a mousetrap, really, this and this and this and this and this and and then so it feels like that for a long time. And then something happens and it sort of it takes control of itself. And so by the time that I wrote the Astrid Lindgren house scene, I truly felt that I was not in control of the story anymore. I didn't really know what was happening. I just was going totally by instinct.
Mm,
And it was something that I added in very late to a draft, and it looked totally different. There was no kind of magical encounter. It was kind of just like musing upon Astrid Lindgren, doing a
mm,
sort of anatomical tour of her apartment, none of which was, and then I don't even, the truth is I don't even remember writing that. Like I don't know where it came from. I don't know why I did it. I don't
wow.
really write magical realism. Like it's very strange that it's in there. But
But
once
you
it was,
could maybe future novels. I like that.
yeah, once it was there, I was like, well, I can't take this out. It feels really important and I don't know why. So I feel like I don't, whatever, it is obviously answering some need in me, but it is totally coming from a place that's nonverbal that you can hear me like stammering over my answer because I don't really know. I don't really know what it is. It's
I
so weird.
I guess that's totally okay, Sally. And I know I saw one of my favorite authors is Tom Robbins, and I saw him give one of his last public lectures, and people asked him like, "Do you know everything that's going to happen when you sit down and write the book?" And he goes, "Absolutely not. How boring would that be? I'm not going to be a slave to a narrative. I sit down and write to find out what's going to happen." And I thought
Yeah.
that sounded so exciting. So you talking about that, and the muse just kind of showed up in some beautiful way and gave you this little magical scene.
Yeah, I still don't get it. I'm so grateful that it's there because I'm not like I don't have a lot of like judgment about the book. I don't go back and read it. I don't read reviews. But when I remember writing it, I'm like, I think this is the best part of I just was like, this is the best part of this whole thing. And I don't really know why, but it just is. And I know it needs to stay. I don't know why it's here. But I just am so glad that it exists and that I was receptive enough to get it. And that sounds really woo-woo as someone that I don't really consider myself a woo-woo writer. Like I find writing really hard and I work really hard
Mm,
at it.
mm.
But sometimes you get a gift.
That is such a lovely gift. Well, tell us, Sally, about the part of the story you're the most happy with or the most proud with. And I won't cut off spoilers. I figure like we've been going through this book long enough that if you want to give spoilers, it's all yours. So cover your ears if you don't want spoilers, audience.
I think like maybe like that whole the the Astrid Lindgren encounter happens in a chapter that's I think it's chapter 10. I think it's called at Mellenspell, which means a pause. And I thought about it as because I really am a student of narrative. I was like, there's so much plot leading up to this that I'm gonna kind of and I have a lot of irons in the fire that I feel like readers will be interested in seeing what happens, but I'm going to like use the money in the bank I've accrued from building up this plot, and I'm going
Mm,
to spend it on this kind of non-narrative section where it's a more lyrical part of the book. There's not much plot happens. You know, Polly goes to a museum she meets kind of a wacky older woman, which is very lightly based on a woman that I met while I was shopping at H&M, who encouraged me to buy this like giant blazer. And I did, and every time I wear it, I think of her. And she was a very fashionable, like cooler lady. I'm like, man, I love that lady.
What color is the blazer out of
It's
curiosity?
lavender. You probably see me wear it. Yeah. I love it so much. Like this woman was so fabulous. Um, so she has like kind of a wacky conversation with this woman, and then she takes photographs of strangers, and then she's just like just like strolling the street. She's thinking about family. She's like thinking about how David Bowie once had a family, but he's such a weirdo. Like, how did he have a genealogy? Blah blah blah. And all of a sudden she kind of then stumbles right into Esther Lindgren's house and has this chance encounter, after which then she kind of goes and resolves some plot stuff with Lars. Um, and I think that was so fun for me to write because again, from I am a student of plot, and so I have the mouse or the and we go here to get to there. And so having this moment where like the things can just breathe and the characters can just breathe, and I feel like in every scene in that chapter, Polly has these encounters with people where I don't even really know what those encounters mean. They mean something important to her, but I don't really know what that is, but I could feel their resonance. So I was like, okay, I guess we're keeping this. And so and so that really brought me on to joy. And then I freaking love a happy ending, man. Like I
Yeah,
just love a happy
I
ending.
know, I know. Like five magical flashing stars on how much I love it.
Yeah.
And
And that was so like I'm just like I don't see that as like a Uh, uh, like I think writing a book also, to use another analogy, it's like you're juggling like 15 balls at once, and like in a happy ending, you catch every single ball, a clown metaphor, and you go, ta-da, and like, and I love giving that to people. I love giving that to myself.
oh, I love that, Sally. I mean, that was my fantasy of being on the show because we were on the 10th season together. And I just wanted everyone to win because we should
Yeah,
all be
you did.
wanted everyone to meet their family and like didn't have to be cutthroat. It could be collaborative. And I think you gave one of the greatest endings for any reality show. Like, I hope reality shows will do this.
I hope so too.
I think it's just what a beautiful thing to have the spirit of collaboration and helping one another out and a sisterhood and amazing character development. And it's around cake.
Yeah, it's a round cake. Like that is totally like it is 100%. That was a wish fulfillment finale to write, and God, I wish that's how it would have happened.
I know, me too. So it felt like it made my heart happy. I was like, okay, in the multiverse somewhere, this was
Somewhere.
this is the story that happened, and
Yeah.
how wonderful. And I'm getting some lovely thank yous for a great discussion. Well, Miss Sally Franson, thank you so much for bringing so much joy and delight to our beautiful community this last month. This is truly the most delightful community read we've ever had. And what a special way to celebrate 20 years with you, my dear.
Yeah, 20 years. And I will say it's Melody's 10th anniversary of curating the community read.
I
So
know. Jeez.
That's a pretty amazing milestone too. And every bit of delight that you feel like I gave you was returned to me in spades by you, by everyone who worked at the library, by the friends of the library, and by the community of Port Townsend. I can't wait to come back. And everyone on this Zoom, my heart is just really full. And I hope you can, feel that. And thanks for spending time with these wacky friends of mine.
Oh, it's so wonderful. Like, I'm just saying, like, thank you for such an interesting characters and such a lovely read, and so many thank you, Sally. So big kisses to you. We love you.
Yay! All
Thanks
right,
again.
off to bed for me. Love you
All
guys
right.
so much.
Good night. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for coming.
All right. Good night, everybody.
All right, bye-bye.
Sally.